What's up, garden gurus? Welcome to Cross Gardening. Today we're going to take a big dive into the world of composting. We're going to look at 3 different methods to help you start composting today. Okay, not just tomorrow, but today. There's some method you can start right now without having any material at all, right? Except for the ingredients that you add into your compost. Now, when I started composting a few years ago, my journey didn't really start really well. I didn't know what I was doing. I was adding a lot of stuff into my compost and citrus peels and dairy products and so on. And I was wondering why things didn't work. And today I'm going to explain to you what are the different steps you can take with the various methods for you to actually have an effective composting system happening at your home. So the first system we're going to be looking at is going to be your compost heap. This is the classic method. Most people do that already in the garden. Even if you're not a gardener, you can start doing that as well. So you can, alleviate having to put all that food into your landfill, for example, right? The second method we're going to be looking at is going to be your Wriggly wonders, which is your worms, right? So how are we going to have a farm of worms that's going to be munching on all those kitchen scraps for us and release some really gold poo, which is called vermicompost, that you can use into your garden. And the third method we're going to be looking into is the Japanese all-star, the Bokashi method. I just discovered it myself. It's a fermented way of composting, and we're going to look into all of that, the pros and cons, and how you can start with it quite easily. Okay, so buckle up because there's going to be a lot of information. Let's go. Okay, so first up is going to be the compost heap. So here I got a bin that I got from my brother-in-law. This is 400 liters, as you can see up here. So now there's multiple ways you can build your compost heap, right? So you don't actually need to have a bin, like a covered one, to be able to start your compost bin. You can really start with nothing at all and just use your kitchen scrap or the cuttings that you have from your garden, and you can start your bin like that. Or you can get a bin and get it covered. Now, as you can see, I do have a little bit of rodents in here, so I'm gonna have to manage that. I did add a little bit too much, maybe meat or maybe a little bit of cooked food that I probably should not add in here, that the rodents got. And how's it got it? It's from the bottom here. But look, I'm not gonna worry too much about that. So all you gotta do is get your kitchen scrap and put it in here. You probably read a lot on the internet that you need a good ratio of greens versus the browns. The greens adds the nitrogen. This is what we call the green. This is all your kitchen scraps, your grass clippings, and also your coffee grounds, by the way. And your browns are anything that is dead material that was once living. And this is like your here, my leaf mulch, right? So I'm just gonna add and sprinkle on top, right? So you want a 30-to-1 ratio, but to be honest, here we're talking about volume, we're not talking about mass. So how do you go and measure that? Just go and figure that out, right? But I would say don't worry about it. Even if you don't have a good mix of everything, it's still gonna work anyway, right? Even if it doesn't get hot, it's still gonna work anyway. And if we're talking about hot composting anyway, so we're probably talking about a 1 cubic meter of a pile, not such a small pile. So here you're not going to do some real hot composting that's going to kill your seed, that's going to kill your pathogens. It's not going to kill that, right? Hence why you don't want to add your diseased plants into here, and you don't want to add the seeds of your potential weeds that you're pulling out of the soil in here directly, right? Because it's not going to kill it. So what that means that when you're going to put that in around your garden, you're going to start having some weeds growing, which is not what you want. So make sure that what you add in here is not things that's going to hurt you in the future. But in any case, I don't care too much about that ratio. So what I do is I add some nitrogen and I add a little bit of carbon material as well. When it starts smelling, I know that I have too much nitrogen, so this is how I know I need to add some more browns. If it gets too wet, then I don't have enough browns, so I'm gonna add some more browns into it, and that's gonna make it a little bit more, it's gonna attract the water, so remove a little bit of water from the actual pile, and right, if it's not heating up enough, if it's not actually decomposing, then I don't have enough nitrogen, so then I'm gonna add a little bit more nitrogen. So this is how you can know whether or not it's lacking some nitrogen, or if there's too much nitrogen. So don't worry too much about the ratio of greens versus browns. Now, like I said, this is really good because you can really have a setup for pretty much free straight away. But the thing that is not so good with that is that if you want to have quick compost, you need to turn your pile. That's gonna aerate your soil so that your microbes gonna get in activity again when it gets anaerobic. So when there's not enough air in your compost pile, you got different kind of microbes working. You got the anaerobic microbes working, and those ones, they work quite slow compared to the aerobic microbes, which is the microbes that need air to survive and to actually do their work, right? So you do want to have those aerobic microbes working in your pile, not the anaerobic ones. So make sure that you aerate it, and only aerate it about once a week. And it is a little bit of work, right? So that's why it's a moderate effort to be able to get your compost pile going, but you can get it pretty much starting for free. The way I turn it, look, there's people who basically just use a stick, just like this one, and you can just go to the bottom and just turn it, right? That's gonna aerate it. You can just do that. Or some people get like a power planter that hooks on a drill, and so they drill anything that is the material that is down the bottom back at the top, right? I don't like that method, and I don't use that method because that's probably gonna hurt some of my worms that I got growing in here, right? So instead, what I do is I pick up the bin, I put that on the side, and then I just move from the top to the bottom the material from this spot into the bin on the side. And so that's going to turn the pile over and mix it up all over again, so that the things that are at the top that are not broken down as much is going to be at the bottom now, so that's got a chance to break down very quickly. And that way you can really get your compost ready and finished within 2 or 3 months. And this is a really good thing to do over autumn and winter for you to be ready for the spring. Okay, so it took me about 5 minutes, and I just turned over the pile on the side here. Now you can see in here there's a lot more volume, right? I didn't add any more material, maybe just a little bit of brown material here. I have some cardboards over there that I use every time to add some carbon into my pile, which is a really smart way to not just throw your cardboard into the recycling bin as well. By the way, you can just keep it here. You don't want to use the ones that are all colored and whatnot, but you know, the ones that are brown and may have some black writing on it, you can just use that into your compost pile, and it's just going to be fine, and it's going to add some carbon in there. And you see there's so much more volume because of all the air now that we added into the pile, right? By doing that swap over, we aerated the pile. So there you go. Now, just so you know, next to it I have this tumbler compost system. I had this one for 5 years. I do not like it. Okay, and the reason why I do not like it is, yes, I get the worms into it and so on, but turning that, cranking this one like this gets really hard and really heavy when it gets full. And so much that this year I broke it when I tried to crank it. So yeah, so regarding the tumbler, if you do have a condition, maybe you don't have as much mobility as I luckily have, or maybe as much strength as I have, maybe the tumbler is good for you, right? But you may want to get a metal one that is really sturdy rather than those plastic ones that may break over time, okay? Now, the other good thing about this kind of composting is that I do not go and pre-cut all my kitchen scraps before I add them to the system, it's just gonna work anyway, okay? So all those microbes, all those worms, they're gonna get into the pile and it's gonna break that down for you. So yeah, I would not worry too much about trying to cut it into smaller pieces, unless it's like a massive amount of it that you're adding all at once. Maybe it makes sense to break it down a little bit. But if you are like me, like adding just a bucket every couple of days to it, you'll be fine. Don't need to go and pre-cut all your veggies as you add them into it. Okay, next composting method. Let's go. Now I'm gonna show you how I feed my worms in my vermicompost. I love the vermicompost. Why? Because it's fun. It's actually fun. You got some little pets that you're feeding, that you can see them, you know, living their life in that little bin that you're providing them, and you need to feed them, right? And so I'm gonna show you how you do that. The thing that you need to know first, though, is that your vermicompost, you don't want to just throw your bits and pieces of food and any kind of food into them, right? You can't put cooked food into that. You can't put some really big pieces of food as well, because they got a really small mouth. You got to think that if they got a small mouth, that means that they can eat only a little, and they don't have teeth. They can't just go and munch like, you know, you and I would do onto an apple, for example, right? They only eat decomposed material. So it needs to decompose a little bit so that it's small enough for the worms to be able to eat it. So we can help with that though. And how we're gonna help with that is, what I do is I take all the scraps that I generate, and I put that into my food processor. Now, what you don't want to put in there, you don't want to put anything acid, sorry. And those are things like your lemons, you know, your limes, etc. You don't want to put that in there. You don't want to put any alliums like your onions or your garlic. They don't like it, so don't put it in there. Just like when your kids, them to eat something and they don't like it, but you keep on pushing them to them and say, don't eat dinner. Just change your recipes and your list of food that you have for them, right? So this is exactly the same for the worms. Don't give them something they don't like if you want them to eat and reproduce as well. Good thing with worms is that they produce really quick. One worm can produce 200 worms a year. So if you have a good system, you're gonna end up with a lot of worms, and you can start scaling that system. And this is what I'm doing right now. I want to scale my system. Okay, so let's have a look at how I'm gonna go and get that food small enough for the worms to be able to digest it. Okay, so now it's really simple, right? So what do you need to do to be a good worm whisperer? All you need to do for the food is just give it a really good balance of food, right? And for the balance, don't go too crazy. Just look at the colors, mix up a little bit of colors, give it some green, give it some yellow, give it some reds, right? Doesn't really matter, okay? Now, the thing is, usually if I have some eggshells at hand, I would add some eggshells in there, because your worms, they don't actually have any teeth, like I said, so they need grit. Just like your chicken. If you look on the internet, you'll find out that chicken don't have teeth either. And the way they eat is that they get some rocks inside their throat, and this is what they use to be able to break down the food before they actually swallow it down to their stomach. And the worms, they use a similar system, okay? So doesn't really matter, just mix up stuff together. How much? It depends on how many worms you got and how quickly they eat. Usually you don't want the food to be sitting in there for too long, because that's going to attract the flies, that's going to create a lot of bad smell as well, okay? So this is really just try something, see how quickly they eat. If they eat quickly enough, just, you know, add some more if there's no food. But there's no real, you know, science. Basically, a worm, I believe, can eat half its weight a day, okay? So this is really hard to know. You're not gonna go and start weighing your worms. So what I do is I basically look, hey, if it takes about 3 days, that's about right for me. If they eat too fast and I didn't give enough food, if they eat too slow, like more than 4 or 5 days, then I put too much food. Okay, so this is how I gauge. And note that this is going to change over time, because if you feed them well, then they're going to duplicate, right? They're going to keep on having more and more and more population in there, so which means more food. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the lid on there, and I'm just going to go and grind it. It's really, really that simple. Okay. Now, if you get too sticky, like a paste or something like that, just like I got here, just add some more water in there. That's not gonna hurt the worms. You do want a little bit of water anyway for the worms. Water is life, so every animal needs water to live, and that includes the worms as well. Okay, and now I'm gonna try again, and we'll see if it turns a little bit better. Okay, so here's my beautiful worm tower here, right? So you can see there's, you may be like, oh, there's not a lot of worms. Well, the worms don't like to be on top. They like to actually be under the bedding here. So if you look under that, there's so many worms down here, okay? So many worms. And what you're aiming for that brown/black, like I got on my finger here. This is worm casting. Worm casting is just worm poop, just like you got on the corner here, right? And this is what the worms do when you go and feed them. So you want to go and feed them this magic potion under the bedding. So I'm just gonna open up a little bit. Yeah, I can see there's some baby worms as well. And just feed them the goods. Not with the blade. Alright, I'm gonna take that blade away. And then just cover it with some bedding. Just use some newspaper. Use whatever you want, okay? Some paper, some shredded paper, or just like me, some newspaper. Or you can also buy bedding at Bunnings, but really it's not worth it. Right, and this is it. Now in a few days you would have eaten all that food. I'm gonna have to serve them some more food, right? Now the pros and cons of using this is that the pros is you can actually set that up in your house if you would like to. I'm not gonna do that. My wife is not gonna let me do that, but I've set that up here outside, and it's not getting any direct sun so that it doesn't get too hot, because this is black stuff, right? So it would get really hot in there, and they don't like it. They like to have a good environment that is not too hot, not too cold. Hence why it's in the corner as well. Here I got a little bit of a microclimate that is a bit warmer than other parts in my garden, right? So that I can keep them warm here as well. If you start seeing your worms starting to climb here or trying to escape your bin, that's probably because you don't have the right environment in the bin. Like for example, it's too acidic, or it's too wet, or if it's too acidic, you want to make sure that you don't add any citrusy type of food in there. If it's too wet, make sure you add some more beddings into it, right? And if it's too warm or too cold, then you may need to move it to a different location. The other thing as well, if you get some smell, it's probably because there's food that stayed there for too long, so you're feeding it too much. So cut back a little bit on the food, or maybe it's because again it's too wet. Okay, so again, just add more beddings into it. The other pros as well of that, by the way, is that yes, there's a little bit of effort involved, right? You need to go and cut that food or process that food before you put it in there. You need to make sure you got the right environment, but it's really good for the kids. Okay, like my daughter, every time when she's like, oh, can I come and see the worms? And it's so great, right? So it gets them connected a little bit more to nature. She doesn't like any insect, but the worm, she loves holding the worms, right? So this is really good for the kids as well. So good projects for you to have at home for the kids. Now the thing though is that you can see this is quite a small setup, so you can't add all your food waste in here. I can't add all my food waste in here, hence why I got my other compost bin here, right, for all the extra that I can't add in here. But I'm gonna grow it, and I'm hoping that I'm gonna be able to replace this compost heap that I use for my kitchen scraps, just replace that just for worm bins. Okay, but I'm probably still gonna keep a compost heap to be able to put all the garden scraps into it rather than my kitchen scraps. Okay, so yeah, so there you go. So this is your vermicompost bin. You can get one at Bunnings. You can also build one. I'm actually gonna have a video either in a couple of weeks or in 1 month's time about how to build your own vermicompost bin. So yeah, just stay tuned, subscribe now so that you don't miss on that video. So now, if you wanted to start your vermicompost, like this worm farm, you want to know what kind of worms you use. You can't just go and pick up the worms that you find on the side of the road or in your soil or in your compost heap. Those are not the same kind of worms. There's so many different variety of worms out there, and the worms that you want to have in your worm farm are the red regulars, right? So those are the best one for your worm farm because they're really voracious. They love eating. So those are the ones that you want to get. You can get them from Bunnings, or you can get them from your favorite provider if they have some as well. Just get 500 of them. You don't need to have the 1,000 or more worms, right? Why? Because they do duplicate, they do reproduce quite fast as well. Okay, so with one worm you can end up with 200 worms in a year. So really start with those 500, give them the right environment, give them the right food, and you will see that this farm is going to start to explode with the number of worms that you're going to end up with. Okay, so let's talk about the Bokashi method. This is the fermentation sensation. It got me so excited because there's things that I can't and I'm not going to put on my compost heap. And those are things like the bones, the meats, the cooked food, right? Because I don't want to attract any rodents and I don't want to have any smell coming out of my compost. So I didn't put any of those things inside my compost, right? And then last week during the class, they talked about the Bokashi method where you can add cooked food into it and meat and small bones. I was like, wow, I'm not gonna send that into my landfill anymore. I can actually start using that and put that back into my garden to be able to grow my food. So let's have a look at my setup that I got in my house right now, right? So here on our kitchen sink, I got a small Fogo box here, which we got from the council. Usually what you would do with that, you will take the, you put this little bag in it, which is compostable, by the way, and you will put that back into the bin that the council gives you, that's picked up every Monday here in Ringwood, right? But I do not throw this bag over there anymore. I put that into my Bokashi setup. And so what I do is, you fill that with food. You can put bread in there. You can put your breakfast stuff. You got some cooked food as well. And what I do, I'm just going to pick that up. And this is what you want to do, right? Just pick it up. And I got my Bokashi set up outside, just outside the kitchen here, which is this little box here, which I actually had for 5 years. I never got into Bokashi, but now that I know how it works, like I said, I'm really, really excited, right? So this is fermentation, and it doesn't really have any foul odors, right? So what you do is you basically go and put your food in there. Don't put it all straight away, just have a, layer it. Because what we're gonna do is, please don't put the plastic in there either. What we're gonna do is, here I got my Bokashi brand, and this is a mix of bedding for microorganisms, including as well some, what is it called, EM, which is effective microbes, which are really microorganisms that's gonna go in there and break it all down for me, right? So I'm gonna open that up and I'm gonna show you how you go and apply that on your brand. You can buy that at Bunnings here. This is about $25 the bag, and you really just want to cover the food with this amazing stuff, and the microbes are gonna go and start working on that. Now you do want to press it down, because this is a anaerobic method of composting, and anaerobic means without air, right? So all those microbes are in here are anaerobic microbes, and they work really well in there. Okay, like I said, I'm new to this method, so I can't really tell you from experience what it's like from a pros and cons of using the Bokashi method, right? But I can tell you from theory, from what I learned, and I'm going to pass that knowledge on to you right now. And the pros is that it doesn't take a lot of space. Well, like you saw, I got a small bin where I'm doing this Bokashi method. The second pros is that it's really quick. It takes about 2 to 3 weeks for you to actually have a material that you can start using somewhere else, right? And take it out of your Bokashi setup. You don't want to add too much liquid to a dairy product or even water. Don't add too much into it, right? This is not like your traditional compost heap that you have outside that you need to add water to it just to make sure it works. No, this works without water, right? It just uses the water that is part of the ingredients that you add into your Bokashi bin, right? But you can't just go and use the compost into your garden and start planting into it. This is not how Bokashi works. It needs to be further composted once you take it out of your Bokashi bin. And how you do that is you can throw that out onto your compost bin, or as in your compost heap, or you can dig a trench inside your garden and then just duck that in there and then cover it back and leave it for a couple of weeks. It will continue to decompose and then you'll be able to plant into it. You get a liquid out of the process as well, and that liquid you can use it as fertilizer directly on your plants, right? So hence why on the bins that I got from Bunnings, there's a little valve here to be able to get the liquid out of that, and that liquid is going to be pink, good color. It's going to be clear pink, hopefully, and you'll be able to use that directly in your garden. All right, Green Thumb, this is the lowdown on the 3 composting methods that I wanted to show you today. I really hope that you really liked it. And if you did, just hit that like button. But you know what? With composting, yes, there's a little bit of science, but it's also an art. You got to choose the method that works for you. No method is perfect, okay? You got your own life, you got your own desires, you got your own efforts that you want to put into a method. So choose the one that works for you. So you may want to experiment. Start with one of them. Doesn't matter which one you choose, just pick one and experiment with it. It doesn't work, you got another choice, and if it still doesn't work, you got a third choice that you can go to. So this is why I presented the 3 methods for you today. Okay, so again, if you like this video, just hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this in the future, where we're going to be discovering various things that you may or may not know about the garden, then hit that subscribe button so that you will know when I post a new video on this channel. And like I like to say all the time, never forget that it's never been a better time to become a gardener. So join the community and start gardening today, and you may want to start with your composting.